Okay, so good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. Lots of interesting news coming out of the Euros, especially with the Scotland and England camps having several COVID issues. It's interesting how that's all come about. Obviously, the group stage and the permutations with the best third place teams progressing to the next round. There's been some criticism of how that's worked out with the algorithms and records and such. And yeah, it's we're winding down the group stage. Obviously, the big news obviously to come out of everything is the positive test in the Scotland camp and the players self isolating in the England camp. Um, and now they've announced that Wembley's due to have 60,000 fans in the knockout stages for the semi-finals and the final. So that's all interesting permutations. Obviously, the England-Scotland game here in the UK was obviously the big news of the last couple of days. And of course, watching that game and reviewing that game, England were poor and Scotland upped their intensity level and up their compete level. And England just were playing as if they had won the game before kickoff. It's like the French with the Hungarians. They played the game on paper and didn't really perform. You could say that about Belgium as well. Last night, yes, they won the game, but they were laboured at times, very laboured. So it's all really interesting. A lot of criticism has been thrown at UEFA for how they work out those teams that finish third that progress and those teams that miss out that don't. And it does mean a very good team at this stage will not qualify for the next round. On the England and Scotland side of things, with Gilmour uh, testing positive and Mount and Chilwell having to isolate, so that's interesting. I'm surprised there's not more positive tests within the Scotland camp. I'm also surprised about what protocols are in place when players are in camp, because how can a Scotland player test positive and the rest of the Scotland squad not? There's got to be more than just Mount and Chilwell as close contacts. It does raise a lot of questions about biosecurity, and we will see how much of an impact that has on Scotland. We'll also see how much of an impact that has on England going into this last round of group stage fixtures and into the knockout stages. Haircut, yeah, that is due to come. The beard's due to come off. I've not cut my hair for 10 months. It's 10 months worth of growth. I had a skinhead back in August last year. So for the 10 months I've lived in my flat, I've not cut the mop, and the girlfriend's saying I might need a haircut. Definitely a shave. This beard's coming off tonight. So tomorrow, with the match reviews and the videos I'll be doing, you'll see a different clean shaven me. But yeah, I was growing my playoff beard for the NHL. I haven't really been following the playoffs since the Jets got knocked out. I've sort of tuned out of this season's NHL season. But yes, the wild haircut and the beard will be going. Yeah, the Liam Kirk thing. I know obviously that's a different sport. It's not related to Euro 2020, but yes, it is positive. He has had an interview on Sky Sports, so the mainstream media here in the UK is now picking up that news. But he had a great World Championships. Joint top scorer, 7 goals. That's a point per game. He was going at, if not more. I think he had some assists as well. So he was playing at more than a point per game at the time. I think his development has come on leaps and bounds since he was drafted. The fact that I think Arizona are literally been drafted 3 years ago. I think they're running out of time to sign him to an ELC. I think that's how the rules work out there. He might, but I think he'd be classed as overage for the draft. So it's important that they've signed him. It'll be interesting with the expansion draft coming up, whether some of these players that have now been signed to entry level contracts, how that all works out. Then there will be space on the Arizona roster. I think he was one of the top scorers in the World Championships last month. So his development to come on leap and bounds, and it is a positive for the sport in this country. Very, very positive for the sport in this country. But yeah, we'll see what happens with his career. We've been following it with great interest since he was drafted. The issue with a lot of players that were drafted in the last couple of years is obviously with COVID. You know, that has affected some players' development, and it does make this year's draft a little bit more of a wide open crapshoot. The same with any sport that has a draft system, with some of the collegiate systems not playing and some of the minor leagues not playing as much over the last 12 to 15 months, and all the disrupted preparations to regular league seasons and player development. And we've seen that in other sports like football. So another lack of discipline from Southgate. I wouldn't say it was post match, but it was still in the stadium. I'm not sure exactly what UEFA have stated with the protocols when it comes to COVID restrictions. What is interesting is the second positive COVID test that the Scots have had since the build-up friendlies. This is also interesting that Scotland have decided to base themselves in the northeast of England, not in Scotland. So they're travelling back across the border to play at Hampden when they do play at Hampden. They base themselves in the northeast of England. This is why the Czechs decided not to base themselves in Scotland, because if this happened in Scotland and Scotland were based there, the whole squad would have to isolate, and therefore they would not be able to play for 2 weeks under Scottish government guidelines. So it is interesting on the fact in that case that's both management teams have it's been weak management in the regards to the interaction after the game. Yes, they are club teammates, but it does raise questions about how Gilmour contracted the virus, considering that they're meant to be in bubbles, not meant to be interacting outside of the team environment. So when they're in camp, they're staying at a local hotel, they're in a training bubble. The only time they are sort of out that bubble is when they're travelling to the game, but again, they're travelling on the chartered coach. So questions have to be asked at the Scotland camp, but on the same side of things, we are seeing regular occurrences of players breaching basic team discipline. And if it was agreed that you shouldn't really interact with players pre and post match, then yes, that is again on Southgate. And but it's interesting that these are the only 3 players that have to isolate. I mean, if I'm looking at it, I'm surprised that with only 1 positive test coming out of the Scotland camp, I'm surprised there's not more, because obviously you're training together, you're in the same hotel together. It's an interesting one. I mean, we'll see how it affects the game against the Czechs this evening, and vice versa for Scotland against Croatia. Be interesting, but this is the second COVID test positive that the Scotland squad has had in the last 3 weeks. There was a spate of withdrawals before the Netherlands game. There was a positive test before the Netherlands game. And then you would have to ask questions of the Scottish FA and the Scottish setup and how they're meeting protocols. But what I find interesting is each country has its own COVID regulations, much like each country has its own laws and a whole variety of things. And this is one of the concerns that I think UEFA now have in having this pan-European tournament. Was they stated after they'd said it's going to be a pan-European tournament, this is how it's going to be. We've already seen several venues that were initially announced be pulled from the scheduling. So Brussels, there was concerns about the stadium being built on time. And if you look at Dublin, they lost games as well, which has created some logistical nightmares for some of the groups in regards to where games are played. But UEFA, after Serafin took over, said we're never going to do this again. It's going to be in a host nation or nations for logistical purposes and travel purposes. We've now got the Dutch saying no overseas fans can come in. I think it's the Dutch and the Danes. The Danes and the Welsh will not be able to have any fans in Amsterdam, which is interesting. We know that Budapest is obviously the Puskás Stadium has had full capacity for all the games they've hosted there, which is interesting. And now we hear that obviously Wembley, um, you know, um, is having its capacity raised during the knockout stages. So again, that's all highly interesting. We've obviously still got a few groups, obviously, to sort out permutations. What I do know is Mountain Chilwell will not be available for this game or the round of 16 over the second round match, whoever our opponents may be. So they're going to miss this game and the next game, at least. They have to complete their mandatory isolation period at the team hotel. On Gilmour's side of things, again, he has to isolate and then come back with a negative test um, after his isolation period. That's obviously if Scotland get through. Even if Scotland don't get through, I am surprised there haven't been more positive results from the Scotland camp, and questions have to be asked of the Scotland camp and their preparations for the England game. I am surprised that it wasn't a positive test before the Czech game. So obviously something's happened at some point. There's been a breach of protocol, however minor, and it may not be the player's fault. It may be a member of support staff. It may be a member of the hotel staff. We just, we don't know. I'm also surprised that other nations haven't had any issues with positive tests since the tournament started. It is highly interesting. I mean, on the Southgate side of things, I mean, I'm more critical of how we've played in the second game, team selection. Yes, we're through to the next round, but we're doing it the hard way. And you look at some of the pundits saying you want to win every game. And Gary Lineker, he's much criticised for some of his political views and all that. But as a player, he has stated you want to go out and win every game. That Scotland performance was lacklustre, lacked intensity, lacked drive, pace. There's players on that bench who inject pace and inject excitement. Now, I mean, if John Stones, scores that goal with the header that hits the post, it changes the complexion of the game because the Scots have to come out and play. I still think this is Southgate's last tournament. I can't see Southgate being there at the World Cup. I don't think that the performances warrant that. Post World Cup, the League of Nations, Nations League or whatever you want to call it, the results weren't great. I look at the squad and he's taken players that are not fully fit. So Henderson hasn't kicked a ball. Maguire hasn't kicked a ball. We've lost a goalkeeper in Henderson as well, who clearly was carrying a hip injury through the friendlies. And that's nothing against Ramsdale being called up, not at all. I think they're the best English goalkeepers who were all playing in the Premier League last season. I've got no issue with him being called up. I've got no issue with Johnston being in the squad or Pickford. I mean, I'm not a fan of Pickford, but if they're putting their hand up and putting the effort in, they obviously deserve to be picked. But you've got players who should have gone on to the main squad, like Ward-Prowse and Bamford, who've been left out. And you've got players in the squad who are not fully fit. There's, a lack of balance in that squad, in my view. The midfield looks very thin if there's any injuries. And that's if we've really progressed far in the tournament. And, the insistence of, Kane's the captain, he doesn't strike me as a strong leader. There's none of this, leading the troops, really. He was very poor against Scotland and was indifferent against Croatia. I caught a part of that Croatia game because I was getting my jab that day, but I caught part of the Croatia game. I'm not sold on the style of football we're playing. It completely goes against the strengths the team have, which is attacking or counter-attacking with pace. And if that means quick passing, moving or running with the ball, there's that Scotland performance. Yes, Scotland raised their game, which I expected they would. They needed to put in a performance. The Scottish players did that. English players didn't. There was not enough of players taking the game by the scruff of the shirt and going, right, I'm gonna raise the level of intensity. Um, the fact that Pickford had more touches on the ball, that includes saves and goal kicks, than Harry Kane did in the entire game, is shocking. We're best when England are at their best, they play with a fast-paced counter-attack style. When you have lengthy spells of possession, and I've said this about several teams, it's all well and good having the possession. Look at Spain; they've been really poor as well, and you've got to do something with it. And it's like they're afraid to give it a go, and suddenly it's not good enough. Um, I don't think they're trying to bore the opposition into mistakes. It's just there's clearly a lack of confidence with I made a mistake, because I think players should be allowed to make mistakes. I mean, yes, we can chastise them as much as we want as fans or in the media, or criticism should be there, should be fair criticism. Obviously, I think there's some players who do get a fair bit of unfair criticism, but the players didn't want it enough against Scotland. I remember in Euro '96, both sets of players already wanted that game, and I remember Gazza's goal. And I did say, like, before the tournament started, I was not sold and confident with this team setting the tournament alight. The performance against Croatia in the heat and humidity was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm not saying, that was a poor game. And it was a complete opposite to the Albania and Poland qualifiers and the friendlies we saw in the build-up to the tournament. That Romania game I watched, I was not sold on them. They weren't overly competent against Austria. And there's players that played well in those games, like Ward-Prowse, like Patrick Bamford wasn't even considered, and you have to look at it. And these are players that are playing for what I would call unfashionable clubs. Southgate is as selected from the fashionable clubs, and I look at it and I'm going, there's no Leicester players in that squad, which I find surprising. They're FA Cup winners and they finished in the European places. There's a lot of Tottenham players in that squad, and Tottenham were poor this season, absolutely shocking this season. And whether you agree with the taking of the knee or not, that's irrelevant. But they were booed off at half time. They were booed off at full time, and rightly so. And when you're saying get behind the team, I'm sorry, but with a performance like that, they deserve criticism, and the criticism comes from the fans. They're not happy with the performance. The criticism comes from the media because they're not happy with some of the squad selections, how the substitutions were worked, who came on, who stayed on the bench. And now the players, I wouldn't say they've misbehaved. I think they've been a bit naive in their post-game socialising with each other. They are young. I'm not saying they've done anything massively wrong, but if they were given strict instructions by the FA and strict instructions by UEFA, then they have clearly breached that. On Southgate's side of things, the team is the reflection of the manager, and he was a defender's defender in the sense that he was a solid centre-back. He wasn't a roving centre-back. I do think that the style of play, I don't know if we have one. I think looking at it, if you're going to play with pace, play with pace. We are not suited to a possession game. We never have been. We are clearly suited to a fast-paced counter-attack. But I don't have the faith in the defence to do that. I don't have the faith in the starting goalkeeper and Pickford, the number one, to do that. Now, people mock Southgate with his selections for so many right backs in the squad. The fact that Trippier can play left back, and we can debate that to death, but he can. And he can play midfield. That's fine. Kyle Walker hasn't played a game yet. Shaw and Trippier have rotated in that wing back role on the left hand side, which is fine. I've got no issue with that. But he's taken Maguire, ankle injury, not fully fit, clearly. Jordan Henderson, 45 minutes since February. And it's one of those debating points over what is our best lineup. I think Calvert-Lewin should be given a run out against the Czechs. I believe that. I think Grealish should start. I think Sancho should get a run, at least in the second half. Get him on. That Czech defence is not the paciest defence. They're well organised, but that Czech defence can be opened up. And the way to open up that Czech defence is with pace on the ball and pace movement off the ball and quick paced passing. They're quite a physical defence, so you don't necessarily want to get crosses into the box, but you want to drive at the defenders, stretch the midfield. Because Schick looks dangerous going the other way. He's a player playing with confidence. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think questions do have to be asked of some of the squad selections. And yeah, look, the first game, we won the game for the first time ever. But we're not the only team not playing fully to our potential. The French, I'm not overly sold on the French and how they're playing. Yes, they beat Germany, but it was an own goal that got them there. And they fluffed their lines against a Hungarian team that is hardworking and passionate, but is lacking that little bit of killer edge. And they laboured to a draw there. And I look at it, and for me, the Danes are playing on pure emotion, and that win over Russia was immense. The Belgians, there's a few defensive frailties there, and they weren't fully fluid. They were still laboured in their victory over Finland, and they had to work for that. The Dutch, defensively suspect going forward, are absolutely unpredictable. You can't predict what the Dutch do. And then for me, the Italians are the standout at this point so far. The Italians haven't conceded a goal. They play a very unorthodox, non-traditional style for them. And guess what? They play fast-paced attack. Doesn't matter if they've got loads of possession. Yeah, I think the Croatia game, it was the heat and humidity. You have to take that into consideration. They did start like a freight train. But yeah, imagine Mancini with our players and the style of football he's playing. He would just pick players on form rather than what club they play for. I honestly believe players like Ward-Prowse have missed out when they should be in the squad. But this is a historical thing with England that dates back 20, 30 years. Players that are playing for unfashionable clubs don't get selected when they should. Bamford and Ward-Prowse are two players that should be in that squad. You know, yes, Southampton, their second half of the season tailed off a bit. Ward-Prowse still has that free kick ability, that corner ability where you can just swing balls in to dangerous areas and direct from free kicks. Yes, you've got Trippier in there as well. Bellingham, unpredictable. Most of the opposition outside Germany wouldn't have played against him. So those players based in Germany would have some idea of what he's about. But for the most part, he's that. It's like taking Theo Walcott to the World Cup in 2006. Didn't get a kick. Now, I can understand having some uncapped players and some junior players in the squad just for tournament experience, being around a training camp, being around a tournament, being involved in that. But these players have got caps now. Well, they're going to get their tournament experience because this is the game. You've qualified. Let's see if some of these players, get a second half. Let's see if some of these players, get given a run out. I'm not sold on the squad selection. And the problem is, it's all well and good having a stable squad, but you look what Italy did against Wales. They still won the game, and they rotated the squad and gave some guys who haven't played yet 90 minutes. I think Declan Rice has done very well. I do, in his role. I think he's played very well. He deserves to be in the starting lineup. He's done nothing wrong. He's doing his job. What he's selected to do very, very well. But I do think Bellingham and Sancho need to be in there. I would have Grealish in there. I'm not a massive fan of Grealish because he can be a bit hit and miss, but he does draw defenders to him. Even if he's having a bad game, he's creating space for others by just being on the field. Quite literally, he is creating space for others because the opposition know what he is capable of. If they've done the research of looking at him at club level, looking at tape, or in this case, digital, they've watched the reruns of his play and what he is capable of, and he's moving off the ball, you would know he's a dangerous player to have on the field. Even if he's having an iffy game, Grealish he will attract defenders either to mark him out the game, which then creates space for a Bellingham to have a driving run, pass it to Sancho, and drive at them. Difference between Kane and Calvert-Lewin. Calvert-Lewin's got a bit more pace. I am questioning the weakness in midfield with the squad selection, not the players necessarily selected, although clearly some players are not playing in form right now. But I would put Calvert-Lewin, definitely get him on, and play Grealish as like an attacking midfielder, false 9, false 10, just behind him, because they will link up brilliantly. I'm not having a go at Declan Rice. I think he's doing a brilliant job in his role. That's what he's selected to do. But I have my reservations about the lineup, how we're playing. And that Scotland game I was close to falling asleep at one point. It's going to be interesting to see how they perform this evening. They've got to play better, But this reminds me of Euro '96. We drew the first game against Switzerland. We weren't convincing. We beat Scotland in the second half, but that was actually a very close game, if I remember correctly. Gaz's wonder goal is one of the most one of the greatest goals in the Euros of all time, happened in the group stage. But then we played Holland in the last game of the group, a very good Dutch side. We beat them 4-1. And that's a problem England have had for years, is the inconsistency. It's the same with this team. The inconsistency is there. And I just don't know. I think Calvert-Lewin and Rashford played well in the friendlies. I would go with Rashford and Calvert-Lewin as a because they've got height, they've got mobility, they've got a bit more pace than Kane, and Rashford can drop that a little bit deeper into a more attacking midfield winger kind of role. If you want to adapt the formation during the game, rotate him off flanks, put him on the left, put him on the right, mix it up. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm going to stick to the one game. I tend to do that in these final group matches. I tend to stick to one and just keep updated on the score in the other. That's what I did at the 2018 World Cup. That's what I've done. I think in every major tournament, I will flick over occasionally, but as I don't have a TV plugged in, my TV's there, but it's not plugged in. I think I'm just going to stick with whatever game I choose, really. If I just stick with the Scotland-Croatia, we know that neither of those sides are confirmed for the next rounds. Croatia have to win. Obviously, Scotland have to win as well. They both got a point each. So that'll be two sides expected to go for it. England and the Czechs is about who finishes top. It's going to be an interesting game. I mean, if England can get a positive result and have a positive performance, that might wake some of the players up. But I'm not sold on this team doing well. I hope they surprise. I hope England, figure it out. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say Dominic Calvert-Lewin isn't good enough, but that's personal opinion. I think he did play very, very well in the friendlies. Considering again the slow pace possession, he had to come deeper and he was making runs and not getting seen. So it's like when Sterling had the shout for the penalty, there was a player available. He could ping it out to him and he can cross it in, and he decided to keep hold of the ball and be selfish. And that's not his role in the team. He's not playing for Man City. He's playing for England at this point. But yeah, there's a shout to have Ings in the squad. Patrick Bamford in the squad, or Prowse in the squad. So yeah, you can make those arguments. and they're fair arguments to make. I have no issue with those arguments being made. But on looking at how the squad is put together with just players selected, not names of players, but the positions that they play in, the midfield is my concern, considering we're so thin on the ground in the midfield area. Do I think Southgate's keeping his job? I'll be interested to see if they turn up tonight and actually give the Czechs a good game. Because I reckon the Czechs will rest some players and do some squad rotation because they've had a couple of physical games, Czechs. And I think that the Czechs are playing better than they expected to. I think they're going to rotate players. Absolutely. I think any competent manager, if you know you're through to the next round, they're going to tinker a little bit. England need to play with pace and energy. If they're going to play like they played against Scotland, and okay, in the Croatia game, the humidity and the heat did take its toll because it was an earlier kickoff. It was a very hot day. But if they play with the intensity they played in the first half of the first half against Croatia, in this game, they will win. The difference is the Czech team, yeah, they ride their luck, but at the same time, they are scoring. They've scored more goals. They've upped their level, and England need to match their passion and their intensity. Not about skill necessarily, it's passion and intensity. We've got some great technical players who've got great technical skills. But this has been said about the Spanish. They've got some great technical players. They can pass the ball brilliantly. They've got no one who can pick that lethal pass, and they've got no one who can drive the ball at the opposition. Ball at feet or with a driving run, pulling the game open. But I honestly don't know. I think having players unfit in the squad is a problem. And this Czech side, they like the Euros. Historically, the Czechs do better at the Euros than at World Cups. And they have a habit of, in this particular tournament, raising their game. It seems how the Czechs work in their cycle. In a 4-year cycle, they seem to peak at the Euros and then trough at the World Cup when they qualify. This Czech side could be dark horses, not only just to win the group, but actually do something in the knockout stages because they are unpredictable. Do I think Southgate keeps his job? I mean, if we get badly beaten, if we lose badly tonight and then lose badly in the second round, that completely changes the complexion of the conversation. But look at Roy Hodgson. I mean, the problem with the Roy Hodgson situation, if we go back in time a little bit pre Southgate, when he took over in 2012, he had a very short space of time to work out what to do. I'm not saying Roy Hodgson's a bad manager. I think he's a very good personnel manager, like talking individually to players and making a team hard to break down. Going forward, his teams don't necessarily score a handful of goals, but Roy Hodgson was just shoved in there as an interim, and he had very little time from being appointed to get his best team together, and he had 3 tournaments, and the team were progressively getting worse. The difference is Southgate's been involved with the FA at the youth levels, so he knows a lot of these young players, but he's not playing for their strengths, which is what I find baffling. I don't know. I mean, I've never been sold. I've never been 100% sold on Southgate as the right guy to lead the team. I think the World Cup in 2018, he got the results, if not the style of football. I think I wouldn't say the performance were outstanding at the 2018 World Cup, but they were getting results, and I think you're judged on results in the modern game. And it was our best World Cup finish since Italia '90, and it's our first semi-final since Euro '96. So in that regard, on the results side of things, the team improved, and they did improve. We've what's happened since then is I think we've stagnated. I think some of these young players aren't being given a fair crack, both at club and international level. Um, and, you know, yeah, we're not playing to the team's strengths. And I don't think Harry Kane suits the team's strengths either. He was poor in the warm-up friendlies. I don't know. Is he's out of form? Is he not 100%? Is his mind elsewhere with what's going on at Tottenham and the speculation about his future? I think it's a mixture of all three. Um, I do think it's a mixture of all three. Is he a very competent penalty taker? Yes. Is he a poacher in the box? Yes. Is he great in open play? No, not so much. And yes, he is injury prone. I don't think he's 100% fit. Um, and I don't think the style that we're playing suits that. The slow possession pace, he can be marked out the game because he doesn't have the pace and movement of a Calvert Lewin or a Rashford. If you put one of them in there, they have that bit more pace and movement. And I think Calvert Lewin is the player I would go for just on fitness. He hasn't had the Rashford's been carrying injuries most of the season, and he's shouldered the responsibility for United very, very well. I think Harry Kane is a bit more distracted by speculation about his playing future, where he's going to play. The mess that Tottenham is in regards to not having a manager selected. They're going through candidates like, no tomorrow. They're having discussions with so many managers. They're all, there's no announcements made. And there's also the fact he's had a meeting saying that he wants to leave. But he hasn't played well in the warm-ups. He hasn't played well in the tournament. He's been very poor. And what you could argue is the service to him not good enough. Well, his movement's not good enough. He's not demanding the ball. He's not saying to his winger or his midfielder that I want the pass here. He's not pointing where he wants the pass. He's just hoping that they swing the ball into him. I wouldn't say Saka's a bad player, but what's Sancho got to do to get a game? He's young, he's talented, he's in form. He's won silverware this season with Dortmund. Towards the end of the season, he was crucial to that cup run. He's got pace. He's got good technical ability. He can run with the ball. He can pass and move. His movement's good. You can play him on the left, on the right, up the middle. It adds another option. Again, a player of that speed and that threat will draw defenders to him, even without the ball, and create space for players like Harry Kane, who need that bit of extra space to get a chance away. Because Harry Kane isn't as quick as Calvert Lewin or a Sancho or a Rashford. Sterling is hit and miss. His inconsistency is what frustrates me with Sterling. But when you create space like that just by being on the field, like a Grealish, because of their technical ability and their reading of the game, it will draw defenders. Because if the opposition have done their homework, they know how threatening these players can be. So that will draw and create space because they're creative players. That means another player who can pick a pass. Oh, look, Ward-Prowse not in the squad, but Declan Rice, I think his passing's been quite good. If he can just get that pass to that right player, the space is opened up. And the midfield, I think, is where this game's going to be won. And that's the problem with England. We're lacking out-and-out midfielders. We're using attacking players in the midfield wide roles. And that's not how you do it. You're playing against their strengths because you're telling them to do box-to-box work. When you actually want them in the wider areas, creating crosses and driving at defenders, stretching the game with their off-ball runs. I don't know. I mean, look, Southgate's picking players out of position. He's picking players out of form. He's picking players not 100% fit. And that's nothing against Rashford. Rashford has been carrying niggling injuries for at least half the season. He's not been fully fit, but he will turn up for England. But it's like these players, you can't criticise the players. I think we can. And rightly so. But I look at other teams in Italy, the way Italy are playing. They're playing a similar formation to us, but they're doing it more effectively because of where players are being selected in that side. Mancini is looking at the players and going, right, you're a box-to-box midfielder. You create the deep runs, so you play this role, but in defence, you You play your midfield role. You just roam the midfield, breaking up the opposition player. And then when we have the ball, this is your channel. He's looking at his wingers. This is your channel when we have the ball. When we don't have the ball, you can make a tackle or make a press. You press. And look at Italy. They've changed their style. They've changed their way of their style of play, their tactics, and they're unbeaten in 30. They've won 10 in a row. They haven't conceded at the tournament. The Dutch, while the fans and the players aren't sold on the formation that De Boer's playing them in, they're winning. It's a different style than what they're used to, and he hasn't fully settled on his final favoured formation, but they're winning games because in attack they're playing so unstructured that he's basically said to his attacking players, go find the space, go play with flair, play with pace, make the runs, scream at each other for the ball, challenge the opposition defensively out of their structure. And that's why the Dutch are winning games. They've only thrown a game or two away, but that's why the Dutch are winning games. The Belgians, they've had a few wobbles. I'm not sold on some of their players. Defensively, they were exposed against Denmark's attack. But at the same time, they're winning games. Because Martinez, whether you like him or dislike him as a manager, is playing players in the right position. And therefore playing the players in the right areas to which their style of play is suited. It's the pace of play. It's not that we're 1-0 up or 0-0 or 5-0 or however the scoreline is. It's in lengthy spells of possession, the ball slows down, the movement ceases. I've never seen such a lack of movement off the ball. This is how chances are created. It's all well and good having the ball and passing it around and making your little triangles and I just got a notification, making those little triangles, keeping possession. But when you're doing it at such a slow pace and the players off the ball are just standing there, they're walking, that's not how you create further space. It's those off the ball runs and demanding past the ball. And that's where I think that lack of midfield depth is hurting the team. I don't mind having two more box-to-box holding midfielders. That's not necessarily a problem. But when Declan Rice has the ball, he's very good at the long ball. He's very good at the crossfield ball, much like Ward-Prowse. When players are standing still, being marked out the game, how is he meant to ping a 40, 50-yard pass if there's three defensive players blocking the route to that attacking player who stood still? Movement off the ball has to be a lot better. It's all well and good having the ball, but if there's not enough movement off the ball and players in space to be passed to make that little 1-2 combination where you can pass your ball, pass and move, you're not going to get anywhere. It's going to be laboured up the field, and the opposition, especially the Czechs will happily defend like that all day. It doesn't challenge them because if you attack with pace, the Czechs look a little bit more vulnerable, and I can't see us doing that. The Scots did actually make the Czechs a bit nervy in defence. Vyšček, the goalkeeper, had an outstanding game against Scotland, which is why it was won 2-0 by the Czechs. The Scots had more possession, and they were probing. They were moving off the ball. They were challenging them physically in the box. They were challenging them physically in midfield. The Czechs took their chances, and the Scots, I think, there's a little bit of naivety at this level, lack of tournament experience at this level, but they played with more energy than England, and they have done in both games. Yes, I have seen on Twitter and Facebook, you've got Grealish, screaming. He's physically screaming, get me the ball. You've got Reece James doing the overlap and Sterling's faffing around, trying to be all like fancy, being selfish. Yes, this is where it takes Sterling out, put Sancho in. You've suddenly changed the dynamic of how England play. Have Bellingham and Sancho on the same side? Absolutely. They've got a club combination. Yes, I'm happy with the Man City players and Foden and Stones being there because, it's a club combination. Admittedly, defensive and attacking midfield, but they can communicate. This is the problem with not selecting certain players who played through the youth grades, who played previously at clubs with players before transfers. You're losing that combination. You're losing that communication. And Sterling, why is he in the team? It's a team game. There's no I in team. There's me in team. Everyone can be a bit individual in a team, but you have to and there's two guys in space. Yes, one's a crossfield pass. The other one is there, 5-10 yards from him. Makes the run, overlapping run, and he's good at pinging crosses in. Grealish, miles of space. The defence have switched off Grealish completely. He's got his hands in the air like this. It is ridiculous. And if any other manager would have gone, right, you hook it, you're hooked, you're off. You're not playing the team game. Your selfishness is actually harming the team. If Grealish does that, he draws the foul because he's drawn three defenders. Sterling is clearly not beating the defender or defenders, makes it more difficult by suddenly slows it down and faffs around with his feet. You know, it's open for debate how people feel about who's been selected. I personally, my concern is the composition of the team, not the players selected, but the positions that they normally play. Very sparse in midfield, and that is the weakness: is the sparsity in midfield. That's your engine room. That is your engine room. If Henderson, a lot of people criticise Henderson for his, he's not the most skillful, he's not the most flamboyant. He's a workhorse. He will tackle and he will run and he will do the small interchangeable passes all day. Jordan Henderson will. He's played 45 minutes since February. You need to have someone else in the engine room who is the donkey, who is the workhorse, the pack horse, who will just run all day, make tackles, go box to box. He doesn't have to be there to score goals. He's there for his energy and his leadership, but he's not playing because he's not fit. If he gets 45 minutes today and survives, fine. He's contributing. At the moment, he's just there, crook. Slabhead, Harry Maguire, ankle, there, crook. Hasn't played a minute, hasn't played any of the warm-up games. Why is he in the squad? If Southgate is staying, this is where I have an issue with Southgate. He stated when he got the job, I'm picking players with form, fitness, and in position. He has done none of the above with a whole host of players. Foden can play a variety of roles around the front. You could actually probably play him as a striker, as a support striker to Kane or Calvert-Lewin or Rashford. You really could have him as that smaller player, like a Defoe Crouch kind of combination, where you have the big guy and the little mobile guy and the big physical presence. You could do that. Problem is, by the time Foden gets the ball, he's got too many defenders around him because no one's making the run off the ball. There's no overlapping run by a wing back. I mean, Luke Shaw, yeah, I think he should be in there. Trippier, I think, should be in there. And you could play them down either flank, or you could actually play Trippier in midfield as a sort of like a wing back, left midfielder, left winger. You could actually have Trippier out there creating that overlap, giving extra protection to Luke Shaw as well. And then you've got a defensive option in Trippier, and also a good counter-attacking option in Trippier because he will run at people. And he's playing with confidence because of his time at Atletico. I'd rather have confident players. I don't mind players making mistakes. If we go out there and we play positively and players make mistakes and it's a 0-0, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with an entertaining 0-0. I really am. When it is a sluggish, slow-paced, dull, conservative, negative performance, when no one's willing to take a risk, I'm less happy with that. I am less happy with that. As a fan of the game, I like it when players have a go. It doesn't matter if I'm a neutral. If I'm a neutral, I love players who play for each other. This is why I like the underdogs, some of the teams that are more a sum of their parts, like a Hungary, like a Finland, like a North Macedonia, who that on paper they're not going to win a game or compete, but they're there, they're niggly, they play with a high energy press. They're going to create the odd chance, but they play for each other. They fight for scraps. They fight for trying to eke out the result. Finland beat Denmark with their only shot on target, but their only chance created, a header. Yes, that was a very disrupted game for Christian Eriksen reasons, but regardless, I think they would have won the game 1-0 anyway. I look at Hungary against France. They played with more desire. More. And yeah, they made mistakes. My God, they atoned for those mistakes with their tackles, their energy, their intensity, their in-your-face mentality. Their captain goes down injured. Their goal scorer is a veteran left back who's a journeyman around the Hungarian and Central European leagues, who no one ever heard of, and he scores a brilliant goal. with his wrong foot. I mean, you couldn't make that up. And that was done with running with the ball, running off the ball, running at defenders, making the run, getting the centre back, Varane, out of position, embarrassing him, quite literally skinning, Pavard, who I've not sold as a quality right wing back either, and beating Hugo Lloris, who I think is an overrated keeper. Oh, look at that. 3 players who I think are overrated are getting absolutely schooled by a guy who's on 80 grand less a week. His annual salary is probably their weekly wage. And he's just embarrassed them because it's desire. Desire does affect outcomes of games, energy. I'm all well and good saying, look, have loads of skillful players, but when you've got a team of individuals, then you've got a team of players. This is why some teams really do really well. While other teams, they have all the talent. Look at the Galacticos era at Real Madrid. They had all these really talented individuals, couldn't play as a team. I think a 4-3-3 counter-attack style would suit England really well, but it has to be a high-energy press, but everyone presses the same. And then you get it out of the wide areas and you run with it and you go with it and you attack it with pace, because that's where England look really good. That's my favourite style, is a 4-3-3. High energy press, high energy counter attack. It's not everyone's preferred formation, but that's what I happily go with. Is when you without the ball, 2 of your forward players, doesn't matter who they are, it could be interchangeable, drop back to make a 5 in the field to then attack, strangle the opposition. When you attack, you've got 5, 6, 7 players going forward, and then your 2 wing backs come in, and then 2 of your midfielders slip back, and your wing backs come in, and suddenly you've got multiple options on and off the ball. That's how Liverpool won the league a couple of seasons ago. That's how the Dutch total football worked back in the 70s. It was a traditional 4-3-3, but the right back can play centre forward because he was taught in training to learn the role of another player. So when he goes forward, another player drops back into his position, if you're going to do it like that. I would say an attack, play with flair, less structure, you're harder to defend against. If you've got players running off the ball, making movement and interchanging, if you've got a defender who's been told to man mark a player, and he's the left centre back, and that player suddenly is running over to the right, but that player's been told you've got to mark him, you've got to kick him out of the game, you've got to mark him out of the game. You're pulling a defender out of position. Another player slips into where he should be. A less organised defence or an overly structured defence suddenly can't pick that up, and you've got a player in space. That's how total football's meant to work. That's how a 4-3-3 high press is meant to work on the counter attack. That's if you play 5 midfield, you can still do that because you could choke out the opposition, but then you've got multiple options when the play breaks down to get the ball to you. And several teams are not doing that. I was sceptical at Southgate getting the job per se, but he had worked with some of these young players, but now he's not playing to their strengths. And I do agree we are far too conservative and risk averse in our approach to the game. I don't know. We've always had question marks about the left-hand side as a weakness on the formation. I personally would go with a 4-3-3 or a 5-man midfield with 3 at the back. With the 2 of the wing backs could drop back in defence and in attack. Going forward, that's where you can play Trippier and Luke Shaw in the same side. The only time you want structures in defence and attack, you want a free-flowing, flair, expressive style. I think players are overcoached, massively overcoached these days, and it sucks the flair and enjoyment out of the game because there's the fear of losing. I haven't overly seen his record, but I do know with Middlesbrough it's, I think, a 30% win record or something when he was a club manager. But a team is a reflection of their manager, be it their personality or their style of play. It's interesting that you occasionally get goalkeepers being really good managers, actually, because goalkeepers are normally mental. But teams that are coached by goalkeepers, and what I find really interesting is they're very defensively sound, and in attack they are just so difficult to play against. And I do remember Ricardo Lavolpe when he was Mexico manager. Yes, they lost to extra time to a Maxi Rodriguez goal to Argentina, but in the group stages they were brilliant to watch because defensively they were physical, they were organised, and in attack it was even Marquez, the centre back, was running with the ball up 40, 50 yards, and they were playing with a no fear attack. Um, but defensively, they were very well organised. They didn't progress far in the tournament because of an extra time winner by Maximo Rodriguez, which was a goal out of nothing, an individual goal. And there's a style of play called Volpism. Ricardo, the Volpe. There's a style of thought in Latin American football that is strong defensively and free flowing, aggressive in attack, and an aggressive high press. So there is a school of thought in Latin American football, so South American, Central American football, which is the Ricardo Lavolpe school, where you are defensively solid, aggressive, gnarly. You may give away a few niggly fouls, but in attack, it's so free flowing and interchangeable where you interchange players. When you set up your standard formation from the kickoff, so in defence, this is where your players will be in their rigid formation defensively, but in attack, it becomes free flowing. You get wing backs involved, centre backs charging forward. It's like David Alaba, basically an unorthodox sweeper who just plays anywhere in attack, but in defence he's a centre back, but in attack he's just roaming around the field. That's what we need. Yeah, I think defensively you want to be organised and well drilled in defence. It's in attack you want to have a bit more free flow and a bit more, openness. Um, but you've got to know when the ball's turned over, have a high press, an organised high press where you hound in groups, you put pressure on the ball player. That's my personal opinion. That's why I like well drilled defensive teams in the sense that they're well drilled defensively, but in attack they just go for it. There's no fear of failure. Um, I do think players are overcoached in attack where they have to be too rigid and have to play a certain way. I think spontaneity in attack is brilliant, but defensively, yes, you want defensive competence, but a free flowing, unrestricted attack. Um, for me, that works best. Um, Club football is different to national football. It's a step up in level. Maybe some of these younger players are getting a little bit overwhelmed by the tournament experience at senior level, and that happens. I do think there's not enough experienced heads in the squad, and I do think that's partly to do with it still being a transition phase. We're still a national sided transition. I think we overachieved at the last World Cup because of results, not the actual style of play. We were too reliant on set plays, too reliant on free kicks and penalties, and only one goal from open play was scored outside the box. No, I think the French are underperforming. They haven't really clicked. They never really actually got going in the World Cup, to be brutally honest. They just kept getting results. And they, found a way to win without being overly the best. Um, but the French are finding a way to self-implode off the field as usual. There's divisions in that camp. They're not a unified group going forward. There is divisions within that squad. Um, Herbert the pervert. Okay, I've got to remember who this is now from school. Um, who is this, my old schoolmate? Because I've got a few follow the channel. Is that Will Martin by chance? Possibly. Um, how am I doing? I need a shave. I need a haircut. I think a trip to the barbers is in order. In regards to how I'm okay. Not actually overly enjoying my time off work. I'm feeling a little bit restless. But I'm okay. My girlfriend's just gone home. She came to surprise me for the weekend, hence why there's been not a match review every night over the last couple of weekends of tournament play. Um, I'm doing okay. I've had some ups and downs. Truth be told, I have had some ups and downs over the last couple of years. But truth be told, I'm in a much better place than what I was when I started the channel. There's been a journey over the last 4 and a bit years. It has been a a journey. Yeah, I will say that over the last 4 years, from where I was when I started this channel to where I am now. Um, a lot's happened. Uh, you know, a lot has changed. But yeah, I'm in a much better place now than what I was 4 years ago. I still have my rough days. I still have um, issues. Sun Yang, what's they been banned for? Let's have a look. Sun Yang. Oh, it's an Olympic swimmer. The Olympics. That's let's have a look. Let's have a look at what he's done to get banned for 4 years. It's probably a doping offence, no doubt. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. See what's happening with him. In 2018, he was involved in an incident during an out-of-competition anti-doping test. That was in 2018. He was banned for 8 years back last year. Yeah, that was in 2018. Oh, hello. Hello. I'm okay. I'm just on the YouTubes at the moment. Can I talk to you in a bit? Can you give me 15 minutes? I will be, but can you give me 15 minutes and I'll talk to you? All right, talk to you in a bit. Okay, bye-bye. Apologies for that. That's me mum. Give me a call. I've got to phone her back in a little bit. So this live stream will round up in about 10 minutes. But yes, Sun Yang, let's read up. So in 2018, obviously, yes, he smashed up the. Oh, that's my mum. Sorry, my mum phone. That was in 2018. It went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport because he was banned for 8 years in 2020, so a year and a half ago. I now believe that has now 2014 ban. He was banned in 2014. He was banned in 2020. Let's have a look. And I believe, yes. So, yeah, it went back to the Court of Arbitration. So if it's just come out that he's been banned for 4 years, that then obviously raises other questions. But the Olympics have got their own problems with Tokyo. They want to go ahead. There's athletes putting out. I think it went to the Court of Arbitration initially. Whether something else has happened since then, that's another thing entirely. But he's had his issues with the doping regulators, be it national level and international anti-doping, since 2014. So there's always a question mark about that athlete and his performances. But that's a non-Euros thing. That is completely a non-Euros thing. The Mayweather Logan Paul, it makes a mockery of boxing. The Paul brothers, Jake and Logan, I can't stand them. The reputational damage they've done to this platform, which makes it harder for YouTubers like me to make any money out of the platform. And we have to go through so many hoops now to get monetized. I was monetized when Logan and Jake Paul were doing a lot of their controversy a few years back. They changed the rules, and that in itself is another issue entirely. Boxing is a sport that I think is with these gimmicks is a sport in trouble. I'm not a fan of boxing anymore. I've completely tuned out of it. I have no interest in Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. I've got no interest in any of them, really. The optics around the sport, the fact there's no unified governing body, you've got 4 international bodies, and then you've got the national bodies beneath that. You can have your boxing license withdrawn in one country, but then get your license in another country. The whole thing is, yeah, I mean, he should have flattened him within 30 seconds of the first round, but, I think it makes a mockery of a sport that's in decline personally. It's got enough issues. It's got a load of problems, in my personal opinion. But look, that's up for another discussion on another video. My views on boxing and where I think boxing's at, and the mess that boxing's got itself in over many years. That's just my personal opinion. Each person's different. In their, I didn't even watch the fight because I have dignity. I've seen clips of it. I've seen where he looks like Logan Paul's. He's done. If that's a proper non-exhibition match, that's completely different. If the Pauls are serious, my pros are serious. I wouldn't say they lower the prices. It's the circus that surrounds the sport. It's the fact you've got these gimmicky kind of fights. It does nothing for the brand. It does nothing for the sport. It devalues what the sport is. It's a sport that's got its own issues to deal with. The fact that boxers are dying in training, and you've got the amount of boxers who basically have brain hemorrhages, early death. We can talk about CTE as another thing as well. The fact that headgear is no longer required for amateurs. You've got a whole host of questions that need answering there. In my view, when it comes to a sport that's got a lot of issues with drug misuse, be it recreational. We're talking Class A drug misuse. We've got steroid use rampantly within the sport. The fact there's no unified international governing body. The fact it's no longer compulsory in sparring to wear headgear. The fact it's no longer compulsory. The fact it's now been dropped for the Olympics for the amateur men to wear headgear. No, it's not just the Fury AJ fight. If they cared, it's the contracts they sign with the challenger is allowed so many rematches if they lose. Technically Ruiz Jr. has another option because they both won one against each other against AJ. Fury's got to fight this other guy. AJ's got to fight this other guy. They're trying to back out of that. They're not happy with it. This is what happens when you have promoters who care about the money. The fact that I can't remember if it was one of the Joshua fights or it was or Chris Eubank Jr., where more people streamed illegally than actually paid for the pay-per-view. A couple of years ago. That tells you that the model for accessibility is wrong and broken and outdated, and people aren't willing to pay it. But that's another debate on another sport all entirely. But yeah, you come back to all these questions about the football. You look at football, and I've actually looked at this and I've read up on this, and the Der Spiegel article in the Football Leaks, as it's called, much like the Panama Papers leaks, raises questions about the integrity of takeovers and corruption within football that involves, guess what? Man City, AS Monaco, PSG. And it highlighted issues with corrupt payments and skirting rules when it comes to youth transfers and youth policy. Look, if I'm going to pay for a pay-per-view, it's a flawed model because you can get knocked out within 30 seconds. I remember Audley Harrison getting done within the first round in 180 seconds. He didn't survive the first round once it was flattened. And Audley Harrison is a great boxer. He's done a lot for his community. He's done a lot outside of the ring. He's done a lot in the ring. He's a great ambassador for the sport, but he was right at the end of his career. He got literally his arse handed to him within the first round, I think, of his final fight, and was done. And you're paying 40 quid for that. No, thank you. I would pay for the undercard, yes. Some of these undercard fighters get overshadowed by the main event, which actually doesn't live up to the hype. At the same time, the whole circus that goes with it is ridiculous. There's more put into the pre-match verbal sparring and all that crap than there needs to be, you know. But there's also that element of criminality around it as well, links to organised crime. That had been raised in the Panorama documentary before Christmas. That was raised. These allegations are not necessarily allegations, they're facts. We know that organised crime is linked to boxing and has been for 70, 80, 90 years. Going back to the Prohibition era, we know that organised criminals, some of their legitimate businesses are the boxing gyms and gyms in general that boxers use for training and are linked to promoters. It's a known fact that there is no escaping that. And the same can be said for football. There is currently ongoing criminal investigations into football with links to organised crime. They don't get reported like they should. You know, I'm not naive. There's always been links to organised crime in boxing. It's a sport that cannot shed the sleeves, and other sports, unfortunately, are anything specific. I mean, the allegations made by Panorama involving the Hearns and what's his name, the other promoter, and their links with this organised crime group that does own or did own a boxing promotion and a gym and was signing up fighters. I'm talking soccer, football in this case, but the NFL as well. There's definitely, with the liberalization of sports gambling in the US now, there are concerns being fairly raised. Yeah, MTK Global is the boxing company, the boxing gym firm. The allegations aren't allegations; they're facts. Fact that boxing is turning a blind eye to a lot of the comings and goings and the issues around boxing. It's the same with football. And when I say football, I mean association football, I mean European football, South American football. Organised crime is there. And I do have concerns about a whole variety of things. They're looking at matches being fixed at the top level for a long time, and I looked at the amount of match fixing scandals involving football, not NFL or CFL, but football, and they're growing in regularity. In the last 20 odd years, I mean, I looked online and I found some big ones, and there's a lot. Turkish football, Greek football, Italian football, German football, French football, English football's been involved in the lower levels. There's been some irregular accounting at several clubs in the European game. It's spreading to other sports as well. So it's there. There is an insidious undercurrent there. So, yeah, we'll see. But anyway, I've actually got to go because I've got to talk to my mum and have a conversation about a few bits and pieces. But it's been a fun little live stream, some interesting questions. I will be doing a match review. I'll pick one of the matches. I'll probably watch the England-Czech game because it's obviously going to get the most attention. The Scotland-Croatia game, Croatia, if they win, they have a chance of going through with 4 points. Scotland, if they win, they have a chance of going through with 4 points. It all depends on the goal difference at the end of the day in that game. It really does. The England-Czech game, it's we don't know who the winners and second place are going to play in the next round. It's one of 12 teams. Literally until all the groups are finished, the permutations of who qualifies as the best third place teams and the way it's worked out is a head scratcher. How can England all be guaranteed the next round when technically it should be the 4 best third place teams go into that next round. And they'll try to some of the algorithms and goals for and goals. It's all getting a little bit farcical, and I'm not sold on that's the best way to do it. I think you should look at goals scored, goals against, yellow and red cards. That'd be how I would work out the best fourth place, the four best third place teams. But UEFA and FIFA have got their own mathematicians. It's a mathematician's wet dream, but for everyone else, it's actually really confusing. It's not very transparent. So the theory behind it and the mathematics behind it are very confusing. It's goal difference head to head, and then it comes down to disciplinary record as well is another one. So the disciplinary record makes things interesting because there have been a few red cards in the tournament. So yes, Wales got through, but had they finished third in their group, they had a red card, and that then goes against Wales for having a person off. It's Ampadu should have been a red card. It's debatable. He went over the ball. Yeah, it's 50-50 on that one. Opinions on the game tonight. I'm hoping for just a positive performance. We know we go through to the next round. It's about getting a positive performance. If we can do what we did to the Dutch in '96 and unexpectedly win 4-1, I'll be over the moon. If we play like we played against Scotland, then I have no hope for this team progressing and developing. But that's my opinion. But anyway, thank you very much for all your questions, and I'll have obviously a match review for you up later this evening. But for now, thank you very much, and I hope to see you all very, very, very soon.